Hi, and welcome. I'm Michael Matthews, the Improv GM, and today we're going to be looking at Phoenix Dawn Command by Keith Baker and Don Garrison. This is by Together Studios, TWO. Phoenix Dawn Command is a game about heroics, about heroic sacrifice, and about dealing in a world where the stakes are so high that you sometimes have to make big sacrifices of others in order to do what's needed to be done to save the world. Several hundred years ago, there were beings called phoenixes who used to be in charge. They essentially took over, and there was a civil war. And throughout this civil war, where they discovered some machines that could defeat these phoenixes, the phoenixes eventually decided to step aside because of the destruction being caused, and gave the world sort of back to regular humans. What a phoenix is someone who has come back from the dead. And once they have come back from the dead, you have 7 lives. And each time you die, you come back more powerful until that last and final one where you no longer come back. So the phoenixes basically disappeared from the face of the earth. And there was a few that were still around, but for as far as almost anyone is concerned, the phoenixes were either a legend that never happened, or it was something that happened hundreds of years ago and not something that still exists. 3 years ago, the Dread attacked. So this is the map of the world of Phoenix Dawn Command. You will notice there's parts of it that are grayed out. This is where the Dread has come through and essentially wiped out or taken over civilizations. The Dread is basically the same types of creatures and evil beings and such you've seen in other games, but put in a very different focus, which is what makes them interesting. I'll get to that in a little bit. The Phoenixes have come back. No one's entirely sure why. It seems pretty clear that it's connected with the fact that the Dread has returned, but the Phoenixes have started to come back, and there are currently about, I believe it's like 100 wings, which is 4 Phoenixes, with an expansion coming out at some point, possibly up to 6. But right now it's made for 4 specifically. Our 4 Phoenixes, there's like 100 of these wings, and what they do is you've got in the middle of the world essentially is this island called Pyre. And from the big flame that they have going there, you can step into that one and then come out at any of the Eries, which are these small like way stations and these small places that have been created throughout the world that have different weapons and such. When you come out, they're essentially designed to be places you can teleport to. But if Phoenix can only teleport to the Erie, they cannot teleport back to the Grand Pyre by stepping into one of the flames. So when you show up someplace, there is a marked sense of urgency. You're not sent on like kind of the milk run. When you go someplace, it's because there's a great, huge danger. It has to be taken care of. And if there's going to be some collateral damage, it might be worth it because the price you're looking at is the world itself. And one of the really cool things about it, one of the pros about it, is you have a sense of stakes inherent in this game that I've not seen in very many other games. There was an easier way to take care of something that you fight kind of early on. That I don't want to spoil exactly what happens, but there is a way to do something in one of these adventures that doesn't end with the deaths of innocents. However, because things are sort of as tense and important as they are, the players felt pretty okay taking out some innocents, like, directly. It wasn't the kind of a thing where it's like, oh, I'll go here, but the people over there will die because we don't get there. It's like, no, I have to kill this person to do the thing. Now, they got chewed out about it a little bit when they returned back, but it also meant that the next time they went out, when they made the decision to try to save some people, it became more tense and more interesting in a lot of ways because now it wasn't just about we're heroes, we do this. It's we can sacrifice all these people if we need to. Our most important priority is X. I'm not going to say what X is. We have to get this thing, and we have to do this thing, and if other people die, we're kind of morally justified in it because what we're doing is that important. So when they decide that they are going to save these people and go out of their way, it becomes, in some respects, more than that knee-jerk choice. I think it often becomes in other games. So you have this really cool sense of stakes, which you don't often see. You also have these high-flying heroic moments that are designed to give you these wonderful sense of drama without the permanence of my character is dead, now my story is done, I have to go back. If your whole party gets wiped in Phoenix Dawn Command, like, chances are wherever you were going, those people are kind of screwed at this moment because they were counting on you, and you have failed them. It might be something where it's not that big a deal, depending on when it happens. Like if at the end, like if you finish off whatever it is that's causing the danger and it kills you at the end, when you come back at that point, things might be okay. But chances are you screwed the pooch, but when you come back, you get to see what's happened. Because you only come back the next morning at the very minimum. You can either come back at the nearest Erie to where you died, or you come back to the Grand Flame back in Pyre. So it gives you an interesting choice, and occasionally a player's like, these things have happened kind of badly. I'm going to sacrifice myself to save these people so I can still come back and do the thing we're doing. But it puts you in positions where you get to do incredibly cool and heroic things, which is another pro. Another one that I find absolutely fascinating, which is definitely a pro, but for a player who is inquisitive becomes a problem, is what the Dread is. The story behind the Dread is well thought out, and it's really cool, and it's one of those things that, like, as a GM, you kind of just want to, like, blurt it out because it's so cool, but you don't want to give it away at first. And every time they come to an encounter, they're thinking, oh, skeletons, I know how to deal with skeletons. Here's the thing. They don't. These are something different. And when they go into it, they discover, oh, all that stuff that I learned how to do, none of it matters here. And there's a bit of trial and error in figuring out what to do. But because of the nature of the game, with one, as powerful as the Phoenixes can be, two, the fact that death is not the end of your character's story, that death is encouraged and kind of necessary just to level up in the game, all of those things put it into a position where it doesn't feel like it's cheating your players to have them go up against something that is clearly outpowering some or all of them. And a lot of times it's not necessarily about the power level. It's about figuring out the rules of this particular part of the Dread. This can be a problem if, for example, like the con game that I did at Fear the Con a couple weeks ago, one guy showed up and he had the box of Phoenix Dawn Command with him. And my first thought was, if this dude has read about what they're going to be going into now, he'll know too much. Like, the fun for him is gone because either I have to be like, dude, listen, you can't say anything when they're trying to figure these things out, in which case he's taken out of a significant portion of what the game actually is, or I've got to be like, you need to find another game. And he'd signed up for this particular game, and I think he was one of the ones that actually put, like, I've read about it, it looks cool, and I want to try it. So when he sat down, I'm like, how far have you read? He's like, I just read, like, the player rules. So I was like, oh, thank God. I asked him if he'd read further. He hadn't. So it worked out really well in that case. But this is a game where if a player decides to read through the book, it's like Tomb of Horrors in the way that, not that it's argumentatively bad game design, depending on what sort of game you're into. But what it does is it takes away a big portion of what makes the game interesting. It would be like if you were playing Myst, like, holy crap, that dates me. But if you're playing like Myst or one of those, or The Witness, to be new and hip, because The Witness is cool until I couldn't figure out how to all the stupid puzzles. But it'd be like doing one of those, and you just have like a second screen that just has got an FAQ on it. Like, here's all the solutions. It takes away the fun part of the game. Now, if you're playing The Witness, check a solution on occasion. It's not going to help you as much as you think with the stuff coming up, because it still gets real hard. But figuring out the basic rules, check it out. It's a cool game. So with Phoenix Dawn Command, you've got these high stakes. You've got these incredibly interesting enemies. You have these heroic sacrifices that are worked into the game. And all these are cool. So that's the general bits about what the game is about. The question then becomes, okay, well, what is the system? First of all, this is the book the system comes with. It looks intimidating when you set it down. This is the sort of book that if you threw it at someone's head who broke into your house, you'd have a decent chance of like confusing them enough to grab a weapon. And it's paperback. So there's a lot of book here. But the cool thing is, when the book itself, so there are 459 pages, starting on page 236 through to the end, all of that, this is all a 7-part adventure path. I don't normally use adventures for a game. This particular one, because it's hard to tell when you first are just looking through it, what makes a good challenge for what sort of level of the heroes, or how many deaths they've had. I found it interesting to look through. I heavily modified them. I changed it a little more so it was less direct encounter-based than I tend to run, but so far the 3 that I've run out of it went really well. It also does unravel some of what's going on for the players, which is cool. So that's up to page 236. From like 235 to 159, that's all stuff about... 159? That's all stuff about the Dread. These are all, and like each of the things has got like some multiple pages to it. So each of these incarnations of the Dread they can come up against have got some cool thought put into them. It's not simply a block of stats. There's information there, which is cool. From like 156 to 127, that's strictly GM advice. And then from the beginning to page 96, that is stuff on the background. So really, this chunk right here, if you're a player, that's all you need. And to be honest, as a GM, reading the background stuff, reading that, the stuff about the marshals, which is, you're looking at 158 pages, then a couple pages of the Dread just to have an idea of what's going on, and then just read like the first adventure, and you're actually good to go for an evening of the game in a pretty short amount of time. So there's a lot of stuff in there. You don't need it all at once. One of the cons about this that goes along with the pro, the background stuff is very interesting. There are several different countries, and they've got some interesting things about the various cultures and about what you would know coming from the cultures. And one of the interesting things is, because you have come back to life from one of these cultures, you know things that are important to it. And that works into some of the adventures. And you can also work it in, like, you would know this story or legend because you're from these people. But, Keith, this book does not travel around a table easily because you've got everything you need in it. So with someone's ability to kind of look through and go, oh, which of these look interesting? Oh, the Grimwald looks kind of cool. I'll check that out. And the person next to them is just, it's like taking a shower with the person that you love or the person that you lust. It seems like a good idea, but one of you is sitting in the cold waiting for your turn for most of it. So like if that was on a PDF, if just the first probably, 40 pages or so, just the background, I'm sorry, it's a lot more than that. The first 96 pages, dude, if you put just that background information that tells you about the different types of phoenixes, which have to do with how you died and how their abilities sort of interlink together, and then the backgrounds, and you don't even have to hit the player guide, because to be honest, that stuff is explained really quickly. Like, as a GM, you can go and just explain very quickly, here's how the game works, and they'll understand without a problem. As far as the con game goes, it took very little time for them to be very comfortable with how it worked. If you had that as a PDF, though, that I could, like, hand the book to somebody and then maybe hand an iPad to someone else, or someone could pick up online and kind of look through, it would help character creation an immense deal. Because it's interesting, it's cool world building. I want to share it with them so they're making some informed decisions, but I don't have 3 nights to make characters for them all to look through it, or to come over to my house and check it out first. So that's a bit of a con. It's interesting stuff, and I really like it, and I find the world interesting, and the various ways of looking into the cultures make them all have some things that make for good choices. There's not really this is clearly the coolest one, because I think there's coolness in just a bunch of them. But there's a pretty good chance the GM's going to be the only one who actually knows this, so please put that on a PDF. The system itself, once it comes down to it, works through cards. Now, it's not unusual for people to do a lot of gaming online, and one of the things, I've been doing a lot of stuff on Roll20. I do have a group that gets together in person once a week, and that was the one we started Dawn Command with when I was looking, oh, hey, could I do this online on occasion? The nature of it means that even if you scan in the cards, Roll20 is not a great option. Roll20 does not handle cards and decks in a way that makes it easy. It's possible, and once they've actually got this, like you put the decks together for the first time, because as you die, you add stuff to your decks, you remove some things. At that point, it's not too hard, but the initial setup is a bit of a pain. I mean, not a huge amount, but I mean, it'd be nicer if it worked, if you had more options. It was a more robust card system. Now, if you're putting it into like Tabletop Simulator, which is not usually a venue I'd recommend putting role-playing games on, but this is one of a couple, I think, that would actually work pretty well there. Probably because even like the enemies, like they've got cards for the enemies too. You have information in the book, but they also got cards where you could have those in there and scan and have those in a little hidden GM section. That one would actually work a lot better to create characters because it handles cards through a physics engine as opposed to like locking them into really specialized notches that you see in Roll20. So, for example, this is a Durant. This is one of the classes. So you've got, like, when you first pick them up, it's like, oh, here's your Durant card. Like, this tells you, the 3 down here tells you, like, how many wounds that they can take before it's an actual wound, like how many hits create an actual wound. You've got information on the Durant itself, and then you go through and you pick some talents. You've got a couple different options at each level, and you pick ones that you want to go with. And the cool thing is, these options actually fit together really well. Different classes tie into each other in important ways. I definitely recommend someone taking the healer because trust me, it will be incredibly useful. You can go without it, but you're going to survive a little bit longer to get to those big self-sacrifices if you've got one. And you've got a couple of things, just like a core cards, that if you are like a Durant or whatever, whichever type you are, you automatically get some of these. And then you have a deck. And the deck has got, like, you have 2 suits. For a Durant, for example, you've got Grace and Strength. And everything comes down to, like, either a Grace, Strength, or Intellect spread you've got to put down. You draw your cards, and these are between 1 and 5. And some of them look like this. And then you've got some that are like this. Like the little Durant symbol down here means this is Durant only. But what you're able to do is it gives you a special ability. It only gives you a 1, but it doesn't count towards the cards you put down as long as Skin of Steel makes a difference in what you're doing, if this is the one you've got. And it also gives you a special ability as you put those down. So the cards themselves give the players all of the information they need to run their characters, so you don't ever have to check back in the book. As they pull out the stuff, they start to see how these combinations can work. One of the bad parts about the cards, and I know some people hate cards in games, I'm actually really pro cards if you've got like a significant amount of crunch, which this doesn't really have a significant amount of crunch, but it has lots of options. The cards are great because you've got, here's how things work. And again, it's one of the reasons this is so easy to teach someone. The problem with the cards, besides the fact that it's set up so right now you can really only have 4. I don't think you can actually scavenge of the extra stuff that's left to put together for a 5th player. But there are some players who are going to get analysis paralysis in a way that, to be honest, shouldn't be any different than what happens in a game that uses dice, because when you roll the dice, you don't know what you're going to get. But sometimes you're looking at your hand going, I don't have what I need. So sometimes having them do something else, or something that they know is not going to work as well as they like, is something they kind of need to suck up and do because it's part of how the game is going to work. Sometimes you have to get rid of the cards, do something that's not like the major attack. There are some ways of pulling some new cards. For example, one of the things that you can do is use an item in the environment, because when you have an encounter, what happens is the GM hands you a card called the Torch, I believe it's Torch, which you then pass around. It works as both an initiative reminder of who has it, but it's also got a list of things each time that the GM will put it on there. By the way, either you need to make photocopies and write it down that way, or put it in like a slip and then a cover, and then write it with a dry erase marker on there. They get a little bit smudged, and it's hard to find the ones that let you get like really fine, but it's been fine so far. That if you use something there, you have to pull another card, and there's some things you can discard, but I've seen some players who like, oh, I don't have what I need, and so then they're not cycling through the cards. So that's one of the quirks about the system that is just going to be a part of it. In role-playing, that can work in there pretty well, but it does mean that they have to accept this is going to be like a low dice roll. This is probably not going to work. You accept that all the time when it comes to most role-playing games. It's just here you need to learn to accept it a little bit ahead of time. Okay, so the other real major con for me personally, and this is the only way this really affects me, is that it stops me from running a long-term game just a Phoenix Dawn command. And it's tied directly into the nature of the game. And so I can't fault it for that. This is a playstyle difference. For me, what makes things interesting as a GM is not encounters. Though these ones are really interesting. It's fun to kind of watch the players try to figure out how this actually works, how to defeat or interact with whatever the thing is that they are having to deal with, whatever this part of the dread, how other people react to them when they show up. All that's cool. But I want reoccurring NPCs. I want those relationships to matter. The games I run are not encounter-based. That said, I had a lot of fun when I ran it, but I just realized I'm missing something that to me is a very important part of GMing. So we went from this to a masks game, but we've all discussed we do want to come back and hit this one again once in a while. Do maybe 1 or 2 missions. And then go back to something that has a bit more of that interaction that I actually like. And my players do as well. My players were much cooler with having this, like, go to the encounter, but for me it just was a problem. I know there's a lot of games that kind of use that as a basis for how to put together adventures, so for a lot of people, that's not going to be that big of a deal. But if that's something you like, you have to be aware it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in Phoenix Dawn Command. And this actually has that sense of urgency that, like, computer role-playing games, it's like, quickly, you have to save the whole universe! By the way, this lady in the space station wants to know if you can save her cat. Oh, just go to this, my son's on a planet! It's a planet, lady. Like, oh, just look for him if you have a chance. So you run around doing 50 million other things when technically the fate of the universe is at stake, and the Star Command, whatever it's been a while since I played Mass Effect. Whatever the thing is, like, they can't, or the Federation or whatever, they can't even, like, give you weapons. You have to buy stuff on your own. So you go someplace, like, hey, I want to save the world. How much is that rifle? It's 3,000. Oh, I don't have 3,000. Guess the universe is going to be blowed up. The sense of stakes are real in this. It communicates that really nicely. But it also means outside of, like, the trip back to Pyre, which it feels like you need to do immediately after one of these things happen. You show up, you do the thing, and you have to make your way back so you can go and keep trying to save the world. You don't have a lot of downtime, and you're rushing around quite a bit. It doesn't make sense to have those recurring characters that I particularly like a lot. And that's fine, but that might be a problem for some of you. So another con for the game, which is an interesting idea I wish was better explained, is this idea of the Crucible, which is when you die, you get pulled into, like, this place where you have a mentor. And you may have multiple mentors if you're being taught from different types of phoenixes about your powers and how to use them. But there's 2 problems with it. One, it's not terribly well explained what this is like, and it'd be interesting to know more about how they see it working. But 2, it's often happening either in the middle of, like, an encounter if someone's died and gone through. And even if that happens at the end, it means let's have a one-on-one for a little while that has all this stuff going on, which is fine if it's one person, is a little bit longer if you've got 2, but it does sort of pull away from the urgency that the game itself is encouraging. That's one of those things I really wish that Keith Baker and Dan Garrison explained better how they saw it working or what they've done with it in their games, because it seems like an interesting way of having like the sensei moment with the player. It's just not as well supported, and it fits in a weird place fictionally in the game. Kind of like when you're wrapping things up is when it's happening, or it gets pushed into the next game, which then means the pacing can get a little bit strange. Because a lot of these should be able to be done in about 1 or 2 sessions. So, to wrap it up, very cool background. The backgrounds are interesting, well thought out. The stuff the GM knows is even cooler about what's actually happening, because all of that's been thought out and it all makes sense. The sense of urgency is great. The fact that you feel like you need to be willing to sacrifice yourself and others to do this puts yourself in this heroic position that not a lot of games really put you in. The stories you get out of the self-sacrifices. If you self-sacrifice, not screwed up. We had one guy at the con game who just decided, I can't spend more cards on defense right now, so I'm just going to take this hit. And he took the wrong hit. Because you'll tell them ahead of time, like, this is the number you have to beat for defense. He took the wrong hit and he got killed, but it was also, he had basically kept this thing busy long enough for everyone else to do their thing. So he was still a part of it, but if we're playing the thing, he has now died for not being tough enough, which is part of what the Durant does. Though you might be able to make a argument for like failure, and how you die actually determines what class of Phoenix you can draw powers from. So sometimes you'll have players going, I need to die because of this, so I can get stuff from my own, or stuff from this other particular one that will help. So all of those things, and the way that the encounters are not something that they can sleepwalk through. They have to be using their minds to try things. All of those make this the kind of game that, probably because of the cards for a lot of people, is not going to be as popular as it should. It only kind of comes in the box set. I don't think it is as well known as I think it deserves. The ideas you should be stealing from this are all of the ways in which these enemies, which you have seen 1,000 times, become new, in which that your raw power may not be enough. Or even if your raw power is enough, there's another part of it that means that, yes, you can do all this, but maybe it doesn't kill the thing in the way you thought it did. Another thing happens. And it doesn't feel like the particularly like a Japanese role-playing game where there's like 4 different boss fights, but you never have a chance to get out of it to do anything, where it's like here's a new form, here's a new form, here's a new form, and you kind of start over from scratch sometimes. It never has that feeling for it. Like every time you fail, you're getting more information and learning, oh, this is how it's doing it. And all the failure is not death. Sometimes just I did this thing, I thought I accomplished the destruction of this enemy. Nope, turns out I didn't. How do we go about doing this? It builds for epic stories in a way not a lot of games are really honestly set up to do. Like that 0 to hero route, that by the time you get up to the hero, you're still sort of dealing with things that are the same level of challenge as you had when you were starting off. I mean, the dragon you might fight at level whatever it is for D&D isn't much different than the goblins you fought early on in some respects, in that it could kill your character in just about the same amount of time. Whereas here, you are sometimes outclassed, but it's okay because you get to try to outthink and figure out by what happens, what's going on. So, highly recommended, realizing that this is for these heavily encounter mission-based activities. So, overall, Phoenix Dawn Command, excellent game, great sense of scale, great sense of heroics. It's encounter-based, so if that's not your thing, it's going to be a problem. Enemies that you have to think about and can't just rush in and hit as hard as you can. That rarely works. And when it does, it means there's usually something else you still have to go and do that won't work on. Very cool game. Give the cards a chance. They work really well. There's supposed to be an expansion that gives you 5 or 6 players coming out at some point. I don't know when. But Phoenix Dawn Command, worth picking up, worth stealing from. Try it out.